But I'm a neuro coach and flow state expert, and I'm also an applied neurology educator. And I came to this through kind of a sidewinder and detour filled journey. I'm trying to heal my own chronic pain. And it's like, I'm just going to be stuck with this forever. So I might as well just do what I can to avoid it or push it down or to the side and play through it, mask it with pharmaceuticals or NSAIDs or drugs and alcohol. And I said, oh, okay, well, I want to sleep. So if this is my only option, let's go for it. And it was pretty miserable, but I would not do that again because knowing what I know now, I know that the head injuries caused issues with my brainstem and my breathing, and the muscles were what were relaxing and not staying with good tone to keep my airway open comically. So, you live and you learn, but that's a lot of this is why I do what I do now. So,
Welcome to Beyond the Pain, the podcast that explores what it really takes to break free from chronic pain and reclaim your life. I'm your host, Leigh Brandon, and someone who's spent over 2 decades helping people get to the root cause of pain that no one else could explain. Whether you're dealing with long-term back issues, joint pain, nerve discomfort, or mysterious symptoms that just won't go away, this show is here to help you go deeper. Because beyond the pain, there's clarity, strength, and power waiting for you. Each week, we'll uncover the physical, emotional, biochemical, and energetic causes of pain and how to transform them. Let's dive deep into this week's episode. This week, I'm joined by Brandon Day, a flow state expert and applied neurology coach, for a fascinating conversation about the hidden role the brain plays in pain, recovery, and peak performance. Brandon shares his journey from a childhood shaped by sport, anger, trauma, and repeated injuries to discovering that pain is not always a direct sign of tissue damage, but often a protective output from the brain. We explore why scans and symptoms so often do not match, why so many people remain stuck in pain even when the tests come back clear, and how applied neurology, sensory retraining, and flow states can help change the brain's output. If you have ever struggled with persistent pain, recurring injuries, or wondered how to better understand the brain-body connection, this is an episode you don't want to miss. Okay, Brandon, welcome to Beyond the Pain. It's great to have you on the show.
yeah, thanks, Lee. It's good to be here.
Good to be here. I had a few little technical glitches, but we're here and we're ready and raring to go.
Oh, yeah.
So, Brandon, could you start by sharing a little bit about your background and how you came to do the work that you do today?
Sure. Well, I'll start at the end and then we'll go back, and I'll be as brief as I can. So
Oh, you don't
sometimes it
have to
feels
be
like
brief
I've
on this.
lived.
You don't have to be brief on this show.
Good, true. Sometimes it feels like I've lived 10 lifetimes at this point. But I'm a neuro coach and flow state expert, and I'm also an applied neurology educator. And I came to this through kind of a sidewinder and detour filled journey. I'm trying to heal my own chronic pain. That was kind of the impetus of it all. And it really goes back to when I was a kid. I played every sport I could possibly find when I was growing up, especially if it had a ball involved. It was like a golden retriever. Like I could just got my eyes on that ball and I just wanted to play. And it served me really well. I was very successful in a lot of the sports that I played. I picked up everything pretty easily. It was kind of the same in school. I did pretty well without having to try very hard, which, seems cool. My friends would always get angry at me, because I'd sleep through class and then ace the test. But really, um, man, I really need to look up this author because I keep forgetting her name. But she wrote a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child,
Mm.
and I read that book and it really resonated a lot with me because I wasn't challenged very much in school, and it was kind of easy, and so I wasn't a big like rebel or I didn't act out like a lot, but I just got bored. And Um, Sports was where I challenged myself, which is great, but it really left me, like, afterward, and I'm gonna jump around a bunch if that's okay, Lee.
Yeah, fine.
After everything was said and done, I didn't really know how to work hard. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to do the basic, like, discipline things that are needed to really succeed in the world. So that was the drama of the gifted child for me, and, um, there are worse things that can happen to a person, right? But,
Mm.
it was just kinda interesting. If anybody has a kid in that space, or maybe thinks that they are themselves, I highly recommend the book. But going back, I kinda grew up, my parents got split up when I was around 11 years old, and so I really threw everything into sports because that's where I was getting recognition, that was kinda getting me out of the house and, helping me to distract, from what was going on at home, and, um and it was great. Love sports, I've had some amazing coaches and mentors, and including my parents. My parents are incredible, but, from early on, I was really drawn towards American football, and part of the reason was because I had a lot of anger in me and a lot of things not going perfectly in my life that I wanted to go perfectly, and I didn't have a great outlet, and football kinda became that outlet. As soon as I put on pads and was allowed to go, like, crush someone else, I fell in love, and it was amazing, and I also gravitated towards, outside of the team sports realm, more action adventure type sports like skiing, snowboarding on snow, um, wakeboarding, skiing, mountain biking, all sorts of stuff that, has a little risk element to it,
Mm.
uh, skateboarding, stuff like that. And that risk trigger I learned much later was really, easy access to flow states,
Mm.
which is what I've kinda dedicated my life and my activities and my work to now is finding the state of flow. But back then, I just knew it felt good and it was awesome. And if I landed a trick and didn't die, I'm killing it, right? But that also led to a lot of injuries.
Mm.
Um, I was actually extremely lucky that uh, I never missed a football game due to injury, which is pretty rare.
Mm.
I never missed, a basketball game or, a baseball game or a track meet due to injury. I would get injured all the time, but I would play through the pain. And it got to a point in high school, where I was always playing hurt, not injured, but hurt, right? And there's a difference there, right? If
Mm.
you're hurt, you can play through it. If you're injured, you can't. And so I had been to the trainers all the time. I was in there every day. I did the physical therapy, I did sprain some ankles. I did, you know, um, stretch some ligaments and shoulders. I did hurt my back a few times, but I could always work my way through it. And it kind of led to the point where nothing was really helping. I would go get my training and in the training room with the athletic training staff and do my physical therapy, but I would still be in pain all the time. And so you kind of like eventually surrender to this idea that, oh, I just got bad knees. I got bad ankles. They're weak ankles. I just have a bad back. You know what I mean? You just kind
Mm.
of surrender to that. And it's like, I'm just going to be stuck with this forever. So I might as well just do what I can to avoid it or push it down or to the side and play through it, mask it with um, pharmaceuticals or NSAIDs or drugs and alcohol. Um, so that's how I lived for a lot of years.
Mm.
High school and then in college, pounding 1,600 milligrams of ibuprofen or Advil every day. Just no consequences, right? Not thinking about consequences and just trying to play through it. And then, along with that, I was playing a sport that was pretty violent, and encouraged a lot of hits to the head, right? Maybe not encouraged, but back then it wasn't really that frowned upon
Mm.
like it is now. Um, and so I took a lot of hits to the head and I dealt out a lot of hits to the head. And um, interesting things that I made no connection to that back then, but now I do, knowing what I know now. I think there's a big connection to a lot of my sleep problems, a lot of my mental health and behavioral kind of weird issues. Uh, I was diagnosed with sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, and severe sleep fragmentation when I was 21 years old in college and playing college football.
Mm.
And the woman that did the sleep study was like, so this was back in 2008, so before a lot of that concussion research and stuff was
Mm.
coming out. She was flabbergasted, her words, not mine, that such a young man who was so physically fit and not just like in college and playing football, but starting on the football team, winning national championships and succeeding with a decent GPA, right? When I went to class and everything, right? So she was kind of like, I don't understand what's going on. Usually we only see this kind of sleep apnea in people that are like obese, that have a large neck, or have some kind of other issue. Well, they couldn't figure it out, and I wore a CPAP machine and stuff for a while, but um, eventually I went to a specialist, and they just cut my throat open and took out a whole bunch of stuff because they thought that, oh, it must be that you just have obstructions in there. So they took out my tonsils, they took out the adenoids, they took out my uvula and about a half inch of my soft palate, which was a miserable experience, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me up front, they're like, this is known to be one of the worst pains that a human being can go through, like, next to like childbirth. And I said, oh, oh, okay. Well, I want to sleep, so if this is my only option, let's go for it. And it was pretty miserable, but I would not do that again. Because knowing what I know now, I know that the head injuries caused issues with my brainstem and my breathing, and the muscles were what were relaxing and not staying with good tone to keep my airway open. It's probably didn't have anything to do with my soft palate and the other things going on in my throat
Mm.
anatomically. So, you live and you learn. But that's a lot of this is why I do what I do now. So
Mm.
after football and college and everything ended, um, I went and produced movies for a while, and that was kind of a way for me to keep the performative aspect going, which I really loved in sports, um, and it was a really fun adventure with a bunch of my buddies to make these movies. And we made 3 feature length independent films, raised all the money ourselves, made them, brought in crews from Salt Lake City and LA up to Montana to the freezing cold winter to film these movies, and it was a fantastic experience, but it really wasn't helping my chronic pain much, and it wasn't helping some of the substance abuse issues that I had picked up along the way. And so there came a point towards the end of that I really kinda hit a rock bottom and had to make a change, and that's why I really started in earnest the journey back to health. I sometimes call it my odyssey to health, because it really was, and maybe the rebel in me really had a hard time with, the conformative kinda chosen path, so I had to find my own way. I've always kinda
Mm.
been that way, and so I kind of poked around in different things. I became a personal trainer, just to make some money on the side while I was finishing up the movies, and started to try to get back into shape and was helping my brother do the same, and, one of my first clients as a trainer had just been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and I was, terrified that I was gonna make this guy worse or hurt him in some way, and I had a mentor, which is a common theme in my life, that a mentor shows up right when they're needed,
Mm.
and said very simply, like, It's like, don't be a baby. Can you work out? Can you teach this guy how to work out? Can you help him get stronger? Then you're gonna be fine. Like, you're fine. Just go help him. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna make him worse. He's like, no, you're not gonna make him worse. Just go help him. Help him feel better. And true to that word, like he gave me enough confidence to just go try some things. And like I usually do when I feel kind of like challenged in that way, I go headfirst, dive into the deep end. And, I was reading all this research on Parkinson's disease. I don't even have a certified personal training certificate, right? I barely even know how to work out myself. But I went deep into it, and turns out there are some simple exercise things that you can do for Parkinson's that have been shown to really help people. And so it's like, oh, okay, let's try some of these things. And lo and behold, a few months in, and he's dropping his medication in half, right? And really feeling a lot better, going back to work, all these really positive things. And for me, that was like a whoa, this is pretty cool. Like, I think I
Mm,
could do this, you know? Um, I hadn't helped my own chronic pain yet, but I really helped somebody else feel a lot better. So that kind
mm,
of sparked something in me. And so I went back to school and I got a master's degree in kinesiology. Again, I didn't want to focus. I did like a pre PT program in college, my undergrad at university, but I didn't want to pigeonhole myself in that. So I chose kinesiology, which is a much more holistic kind of degree where we learn a ton about nutrition. My focus was still orthopedic rehab and corrective exercise. Still,
mm,
how am I going to fix my chronic pain? What's going
mm,
on in my body? And so I learned everything I could from that realm. And I did everything I could nowadays, I would say, from the neck down. I learned a bunch of body work. I was getting massages, going to chiropractic, acupuncture, rolfing, hammering on my body, trying to relieve tension, get rid of trigger points, align my spine. I was big into dynamic neuromuscular stabilization for a while, if you're familiar with that work
mm-hmm,
out of the Prague school. Love
mm-hmm,
that stuff. Still use it all to this day, but it was all quick fixes and nothing was sticking for me. And plus, I had this um, brain problem. I knew it was a brain problem because around 2015, that movie Concussion came out with Will Smith, and it kind of blew the doors open on this new thing called CTE. And so, of course, I was convinced that I had CTE, which, if your listeners aren't familiar, is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, neurodegenerative disease in the brain. It kind of looks a little bit like Alzheimer's, but they can't diagnose it until somebody is dead. So, post
mm,
mortem, they dissect the brain and they see all these plaques in there and the changes that are happening. So anyway, that was kind of became in vogue, and so I was pretty convinced that I had that. Not convinced anymore. Don't think I have that at all, and I don't think that's a, quote unquote death sentence for anybody that thinks that they're going down that path. I want to put that out there for sure. But
mm. Most people think that pain is purely structural. They might say, my joint is worn out or my back is weak. But what I see every day is that most pain almost always has an inflammatory component, and inflammation is often driven by everyday foods that quietly irritate the gut and stress the immune system. When you remove those triggers, the body calms down and pain levels follow. That's why I created the pain-free plate. 7 foods that naturally help calm inflammation and reduce persistent pain. Get your free guide at bodycheck, that's bodychek.co.uk/pain free plate. And now let's get back to the show.
it was scary for sure, and so I dove even deeper into whatever I could get my hands on with like neuroscience and the brain and psychology and mindset um, and then just a year or two later, I read a book by a guy named Stephen Kotler called The Rise of Superman. And this is a fantastic book for anybody, but especially if you're an athlete at any level, but especially if you're an action and adventure sport athlete. If you like those kind of riskier
Mm,
sports that people used to call used to call you an adrenaline junkie. That's a misnomer. It's a bad term. Adrenaline is not anybody's favorite chemical, right? If you've ever been highly adrenalized, it does not feel good. You're stressed out and you're anxious and you're like, it's very stressful. But what happens after the adrenaline dump and that stress chemicals get flushed out is what's called a flow state. And that's what he described in this book that was helping these action adventure sport athletes reach impossible new heights, like in really small and shrinking time frames. One of the clearest examples for me, we rode dirt bikes as kids. And my brother was big into dirt bikes, did some races, and I had some friends that did some races. I didn't go quite as deep into it because I was a little afraid that I was going to get hurt, and I had all these other team sports that I was really prioritizing. But I loved watching it. And I remember when the first backflip on a motorcycle on a dirt bike happened. Mike Metzger and the X Games. I don't remember the year, um, but very quickly after that, like it may have been 2 months, might have been 6 months. I don't remember exactly, but it was very short period of time relative to the entire time people have been flying around on dirt bikes. Travis Pastrana comes out and does a double backflip. Like the rate of expansion, the rate of progress for that to happen is insane. And there are stories like that all around the action and adventure sport world, whether it's rock climbing or skydiving, wingsuiting, skateboarding, right? Tony Hawk did a 900 in the 90s, and it was the craziest thing in the world. Now you've got 9-year-olds busting out back-to-back 900s in like a huge half pipe. Like how? I mean, 30 years, yes, but still, like that is a huge boost. And yes, technology is getting better, yes, and all these things. But really, what he was describing in that book is that these people are leveraging the power of the brain and the neurobiology of flow states to access peak states of performance in order to accomplish things that seem impossible. And if you really think about it and look at and talk to and survey the greatest performers in the world, doesn't matter if it's a sport or a cognitive pursuit, like an executive or a creative, a musician, a painter, anything. The greatest works of art, the greatest performances, all the world championships in the world, they all have one thing in common, and that is this altered state of consciousness called flow, where you feel and perform your best. That like blew open my mind. And I finally had a framework and a reason for a lot of the things mindset wise and mental health and even getting to brain health and all of it. It's all connected, of course, right? But I finally had an answer. And so from that moment on, I kind of just dedicated my life to, okay, how do I find flow in the things that I'm doing? Because according to Kotler and his mentor and the godfather of flow psychology, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, you can find it in anything that you do. Granted that the conditions are set up properly. So I said, okay, well, let's do that. And I dove into the research and I did a bunch of the trainings that Kotler's company, the Flow Research Collective, had put together and started teaching people how to do that. And then very soon after that, I serendipitously fell into a program by a private education company called Next Level Neuro that was teaching this thing called applied neurology. And in a very, simple definition of applied neurology is just the intentional and repetitive um, training of the nervous system and brain in order to, um, heal pain or increase performance. That's a very broad definition, but it's it's using specific assessments for brain areas, and then using the sensory input systems primarily to give new information or inputs through the nervous system to the brain in order to change um, pain or performance. Within 3 weeks of learning applied neurology, just the basics of this mentorship that they do, which is a full year long. Within 3 weeks, the chronic pain in my neck and back and my knees all gone. The chronic pain that had been there since high school, so going on 25 years at that point, gone instantly. It didn't stay gone, it comes back, right, now and again, because those pathways in the brain are pretty well worn. Those
Mm,
grooves are greased,
mm,
but I had the tool to unlock it in an instant. And within, a few months' time, I was not having pain at all, unless I was extremely stressed out or, moved the wrong way or pushed too much weight or whatever, normal things that one might do to overexert themselves. But I understood, and this is the really important part, I understood that pain was not a tissue problem. It was not a problem that my joints were structurally damaged in some way. It had nothing to do, in my case and in many cases, it didn't have to do with injury. Um, it didn't have to do with, damage. It had to do with the brain perceiving threat and then giving pain as an output or an action signal to change something. That realization was so empowering to me, and then I had tools to work with it that it changed the game.
mm,
So again, I went like head first, like throw me in the deep end with this stuff. And then very shortly after that, I started teaching with the company, and that's what I do these days. Is I teach applied neuroscience to anybody,
mm,
trainers, coaches, doctors, chiropractors, PTs, mindset coaches, MDs, anybody that wants to learn it can come learn with us. Even just general population, people that just want to feel better and learn how to, use their nervous system and their brain to do that can come learn with us. And then my private coaching practice, I I mainly work with athletes, and people always assume that's like professional athletes or high level, sports. But really, I kind of consider everyone an athlete. And most of the athletes I work with are corporate athletes or they're cognitive athletes that want to perform. Their
mm.
priority is their brain
Yeah.
and their knowledge work. But I still train them like I would train a professional athlete because their body has to work at top performance in order for their brain to perform at its peak.
Mm,
So, and that goes with all of my traditional training and background. And then the nervous system and the applied neurological foundation underpins all of it, right? Which we can definitely get into, but
mm.
that's the long version.
Yeah, great. That's a great way to kick off the show. Um, I love the fact that you look at all people as athletes because genetically we are, right? We wouldn't be here if our ancestors weren't amazing athletes, right? We
Yeah.
just wouldn't be. It's just the last, what, 150 years where, or maybe longer if you consider the start of the Industrial Revolution, where, we've become more sedentary, we've eaten, a worse and worse diet as every year goes on, um, and different kinds of stresses that we're under. If you was to look at most of the Western world, very few people still look like athletes, right? But
Yeah, that's
genetically,
true.
but genetically, we are. So I'm pleased that you look at people in that way because it's exactly the same way that I look at people too, and it's all about, for me, it's all about optimization. I just want to go back a little bit, and I want to ask you a question. And you may choose to answer it or not answer it. It's completely up to you. But you said earlier on that you got into sports because there was some anger in you. Have you looked into why that anger was there? If you've been living with pain for a while, you've probably felt frustrated, like you're trying lots of things, but nothing really changes. That's because pain rarely comes from one single issue. It's usually biomechanics, nutrition, stress, sleep, lifestyle habits, and your nervous system is all interacting together. When we look at everything as a whole, the pattern becomes clear. If you want help understanding what's driving your pain, you can book a discovery call with me at bodycheck.co.uk. That's bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. All right, back to the episode.
For sure. Um,
You don't have to share if you don't want to, but if you're happy
no,
to,
I'm
go
I'm
ahead.
I'm an open book for
Okay.
sure. It's all good. Um, I appreciate the question because if one person hears it and it helps them to become aware of their own and, sidestep some of the pitfalls that can come from it, then
Mm,
awesome. I'm more than willing to share. The anger, I think a lot of it came from, um, you know, I I hesitate to use the words just because they get thrown around and there's this like concept creep that can happen with some terms, and I think trauma is one of them. But there's some childhood trauma, that, by the way, no child gets out of childhood without trauma, right? It just doesn't work that way because
mm,
children don't know how to process the things that happen to them. And the smallest, most innocuous thing can create a, quote unquote trauma response or defense mechanism then to develop, right? And here's actually an example. And I don't think maybe it had some bearing on me and what happened later in life, but um I remember a time when I was 3 or 4 years old, and my parents were having a get together at the house. And I don't remember what happened, but I was being a little bit unruly, like a toddler might, wanting attention. And my parents put me in my room in kind of like a timeout and said, "You're gonna sit in here, for 10 minutes or something, and then we'll come back and get you. Like, just play in here and chill out." Right? Um, well, I did, and then what I thought was 30 minutes had gone by, probably was maybe 5, who knows? Um, I started slamming my fists on the door and just wailing because I thought they had, like, left me. I could still hear the music going on out there, but, to me, in my little 3-year-old brain, I thought I had been abandoned, and I wailed and screamed for what in my mind was like an hour. Really, it was maybe 5 minutes, and they came back and they got me. So again, like, I don't know, I don't even know why I remember that. Of all the things in my past, like, why that memory kinda stuck around, and even if
mm,
I'm remembering it correctly, I don't know. The way the memories work is a little tricky. But for some reason, that, like, emotionally kinda got stuck in there as a memory and could have developed into some kind of, attachment style or defense mechanism to where I was angry at my parents for leaving
mm,
me, and then I just didn't have a way to process that, right? So just a silly example of how
mm,
no child gets out of childhood without trauma. Because you can't really predict 100% what a kid is going to like lay down in their brain as a traumatic experience and
mm.
then develop some kind of defense against that, some kind of protective mechanism.
Yeah.
And chronic pain works very similarly, by the way. Like, as I'm sure you're aware, you can
Mhm.
develop some kind of protective mechanism that is totally unneeded and unnecessary to some innocuous kind of stimulus or trigger. So
Mm,
I say that to say, yeah, there's probably some childhood trauma, and I've done some therapy and work into diving into those things, and that can be helpful. Like, I'm not trying to disparage that work at all.
mm,
My wife is a marriage and family therapist, and she's all about inner child work and family systems, and it's good
mm,
stuff. So I just want to say that. But the real anger, I think, for me came with my parents getting divorced. I think that's where it really like took a turn. No fault to them, right? They're just trying to make it, and of course they were young too. Man, I'll be 40 years old this year. My parents had a 20-year-old child at my age.
mm.
I have 18-month-old triplets right now,
Wow.
which
Wow.
is a circus all the time, but
Wow.
it's
So you
amazing.
you you look good. You look
Thank you. Thank you.
There's
That's
no bags
only
under the eyes, so you're doing something right.
I can only put that up to my wife and her. She's a hero, a heroine for sure, and we have a village around us that are always helping out. And honestly, like, all the work that I've done, nervous system wise, therapy wise, mental health wise, uh, everything that I teach people, that's the only way that I'm making it personally right now. But my point about my parents, though, is like they were 20, 21 years old when they had kids.
Mm,
I can't even imagine what my 21-year-old self would have done with a child. When I was 21, I was a junior in college playing football, and I had just been on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and I was having a grand old time living it up, right? To have a
mm,
child, I was a child.
mm,
It seems wild to me when I think about that. So I give my parents all the grace in the world. Like, they were doing their best and always have, and they were fantastic parents. But
mm,
together, they weren't working, so they
mm.
split. And I think it was for the best. But for a 10-year-old kid, it was tough. I didn't really know how
Yeah.
to work with that, and I was trying to make my own way in my life and figure out things, and it was a tough spot. And I had a younger brother. I was the oldest, so I kind of maybe thrust myself into this position of like being the adult, and I felt like I had to grow up really quickly. And I had a lot of resentment because of that.
Mm,
So there was a lot of other things that was just like anger was just building, and I did not know how to talk about it. I mean, I was in therapy, they made me go to therapy, and I would just sit in the room and not say a word for an hour and then leave. It was the biggest waste of time and money.
mm,
I would just sit there and just defiantly not say a word for weeks and weeks and weeks. And that's just I didn't learn those skills until later, and I had the outlet, so I didn't have to. Really
mm,
should have, but
mm,
um I was doing okay on the surface, you know?
mm,
So, um that really left a lot of deep insecurities underneath the surface. And again, that drama of the gifted child kind of thing that I was talking about earlier, the sports and the school that I was excelling at, really masked a lot of insecurity
mm,
and anger. And anger is just a mask. Anger is just a way to feel control when you feel out of control because of other emotions like fear or sadness or guilt or shame, right? So the anger really was covering up a lot of those
mm,
things and feelings of just not feeling worthy, right? Feeling like it was my fault, like I was bad, right? And I never really got down that deep, so I didn't understand that until much, much later. And really one of the things that, man, really, shined a light on that was being on the cover of Sports Illustrated when I was in college. In fact, funny story, the first person to see me on the cover of Sports Illustrated was a good friend of mine from high school who was studying abroad in London, and she was in Heathrow coming back for Christmas, and she saw me on a magazine in the airport, and she messaged me on Facebook. Facebook had just started. She's like, "Was is this you? What is happening?" Because I mean, we were a very small college um, in Montana. Nobody would have ever considered that someone would make it on the cover of Sports Illustrated, a global, very well respected sports journalism magazine. So um, when that happened, I sometimes say that the brightest light would reveal the darkest shadow. And for me, those insecurities, they really were magnified um, when I was, you know, featured on that magazine. The feelings of not being worthy of that were huge. And I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to be congratulated for it. I didn't want to be known for it. But I also did at the same time, that weird juxtaposition there. Um, so I would explain it away like, oh, I was just lucky, right place, right time, and really discredit, all the hard work that I personally had done and the team had done. And I wasn't just like minimizing it for me, I was minimizing it for the team and for my city and for my state. So, again, didn't realize any of that at the time. But for me, I didn't feel like I deserved to be there,
Mm.
just like going all the way back. And so, man, was that a catalyst for another journey that I had to go on, right? Um, to understand like what is going on for me in my mind that I feel so unworthy and so bad about this. Like this should be the greatest thing ever to, you
Mm.
know. Um, and so that started I mean it was kind of a catalyst for a really steep downward spiral, which then ended up with me hitting rock bottom and making that change and coming back. So, you know, these days I am so grateful that that happened to me just because it's an amazing thing to happen to anybody, right? It's fantastic. But I'm also so grateful that it happened to me because it was really a catalyst for me having to take the time and do the work to uh, deal with those things that were now coming to light. I don't think I would have, I think I could have kept masking and hiding from those things had that not happened to me. So,
Yeah.
yeah, again, super grateful for all of it.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason, and it's made you the person that you are now, right?
Exactly.
Uh, an interesting thing. Are you familiar with Paul Check?
Yeah, he's
So,
awesome.
um, I don't know if you know his whole history, but obviously Paul was a boxer in the U.S. Army. He was also a kickboxer. He trained the American Army boxing team, and Paul's very open about his childhood, and he had a very large, very violent stepfather, and he felt that. I mean, I interviewed him just a few months ago,
Mm,
um, and he was saying, one of the most painful events in his life was when his brother committed suicide,
mm,
and he was saying that one of the reasons why he feels he got into combat sports is because he wanted to take out the anger that he had for the way that his stepfather treated him, and the only way he could do that was to hurt other people.
yeah.
And when he was training the American Army boxing team, I can't remember how many people were on the team, But he just asked them a question, and he said, "How many of you had, issues with your father or stepfather growing up physically?" And I think he said everyone but one put their hand up. And since then as well, obviously he's been working in this field a long time. Almost every time someone comes to him in a combat sport, they've got a history of violence with their father, which is quite interesting. But yours is a
Yeah,
different situation, and it just shows that anger can come from multiple different directions. It doesn't have to be a physical violence thing. But
for
like
sure.
you say, you just don't know what is traumatic to a child. As a parent, you might do something to a child and you might think, well, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But the child might think that was very traumatic, and it might
Yeah,
be the silliest little thing. But, and then, if that isn't dealt with in a particular way, in a healthy way, then potentially in life that can come to or lead to other problems, which we're going to come to talk about now. So we're finally going to start talking about pain. So,
perfect.
um, what I think would be really good to do is to get your view on, why do you feel so many people still have pain even when, their scans, their X-rays, their MRIs are described as normal, which often leads to a medical doctor saying it's all in your head. A common myth I still hear, even from professionals, is that diet has nothing to do with chronic pain. And that's simply not true. Your gut and your immune system influence inflammation, hormones, energy, and yes, pain. If you're eating foods that drive inflammation, it's almost impossible to feel better long term. The Pain-Free Plate gives you 7 foods that help settle your system and support lasting relief. You can download it at bodycheck.co.uk. That's bodycheck.co.uk/pain-free-plate. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. Love that line. It's all in your head.
Well, it is though,
Uh,
right? Pain is in your head. That's what pain
well,
is.
yes, yeah, it is in your head, but
Yeah,
it's not all in your
but it's not.
mind.
But it doesn't mean it's not real, right?
Yeah, and that's a great distinction too, or a great thing to say is because the worst pain you've ever felt is the worst pain you've ever felt for everyone. And
Mm,
who am I to say that the worst pain you've ever felt is worse than the worst pain I've ever felt? I have no idea what your subjective experience is like with the pain that you've felt in your life.
mm,
So pain is so personal and individual that we have to go into that understanding that thing, that one thing right there. Like you could, smash your finger and I could do the same exact thing and our experience could be wholly different based on your past experiences, based on how your culture views pain, based on, your specific nervous system and the amount of threat that your brain is dealing with at this moment, right? So all of it matters. All of it matters. Um, but yes, it always 100% of the time is an output from your brain. And we don't actually have pain, in our limbs. Like I don't actually have pain in my wrist right now. It kind of feels like I do, but it's not. It's in the map that lives in my brain, right? So understanding that is key. Understanding that pain is very individual for anybody working with pain or has somebody in their life that has pain. You got to give them some compassion. You got to give them some grace because you don't know what they're experiencing. Um, and then to your original question, like if you go onto your Google Scholar or PubMed or whatever research engine you like. You could even throw it into like a ChatGPT or Perplexity or one of the AIs and say, I want you to go look up studies or journal articles on asymptomatic orthopedic injuries. Just type that in and you will get a list of studies, reviews, meta-analyses of all of these people that have had imaging done on them, and their scans show that they have orthopedic injuries. And so what that means is that if you were to take those scans to a doctor, like an orthopedic surgeon, because their tool is a scalpel, they will
Mm.
probably say, "Yep, you got disc herniation, bulging here. You've got a torn rotator cuff over here. We're gonna need to do surgery." But all of these people, well, a large percentage of people that have these orthopedic injuries on scans have zero pain whatsoever.
Mm.
And so depending on the joint and the age, it will differ. But across the board, it's over 50% on average have negative scans, meaning they have, or positive scans, meaning they have problems. Like they have a meniscus tear in their knee, they have bulging discs in their low back, arthritis in their neck, you know, operable issues, but they have zero pain. So it's like, what is going on there? And then the
Mm.
opposite is also true. People that have completely clear scans can have debilitating pain. And this is really common in low back pain. Like low back pain is kind of the craziest one because you'll see people with all of these problems. Something like if you're 80 years old or older, it's going to be around 85 to 90% of people are going to show problems with their spine, but they have zero pain.
Mm.
And then on the other side, you have this like nondescript low back pain that so many people deal with. And a large majority of them, a large percentage of them, I don't think it's a majority, have a lot of pain, like chronic low back pain with no injury and no problems on their MRIs or CT scans or x-rays. So it's like, what is happening here? And the wildest thing I learned recently about this low back pain phenomenon is that they had did a huge, large survey and review of studies, and um, I'm blanking on the name of it right now or the author, but the the consensus was that all of these things were looked at, like injuries, their job, what they did all day, did they move around a lot? How much did they exercise? What did they eat? You know, tons of different parameters. And the number one thing across the board to predict whether or not somebody would have low back pain was job dissatisfaction.
Mm.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm.
Not even necessarily with a kind of job, whether you sit all day, whether you stand all day or work in construction. No, job satisfaction or dissatisfaction was a better predictor than all of the other things for having low back pain. So, what is happening? That you might assume, like, okay, well, it's definitely all in your head then, right? And when you can't see anything on imaging and you're not trained in how the nervous system and the brain actually work, then that's a fair like jump. I get it. I don't know what else to tell you. Nothing else makes sense. You're making it up, right? Your mind is making you feel this pain.
Mm.
And like we were talking about, in a way, it kind of is. Like
Mhm.
pain is an output, thoughts are inputs and outputs, right? But just for all your listeners, like the basic applied neurology loop that we always talk about in this is helpful. So your brain has always got one thing in mind. That's its only job, really, at a basic level, is just to keep you alive. It's all about survival. That's all it cares about. Nothing else matters, right? It takes priority over everything. The way that it helps to keep you alive is this applied neurology loop of taking in inputs from your environment, both internal environment, we call those interoceptive inputs, and then external environment, exteroceptive inputs. So your five, six, eight senses, depending on who we're talking to, touch, taste, smell, hearing, right? Vision and balance, I would throw in there. All of these things are inputs to your brain, to about where you are in space and what's going on in the environment. So we take all those inputs, and then the second stage of this is to interpret those inputs. So based on our past experiences and everything else, like, what do these mean, right? And then based on that perception of what's going on and whether or not these inputs feel like a threat or not, we're going to get an output. And then that output becomes an input, and the loop continues. Always, every moment of every
Mm.
day, forever. So if we want better outputs, like less pain, better performance, uh, then in the applied neurology world, it would behoove us to work on giving the brain better inputs or changing the interpretation and perception. Now, if the interpretation and perception of those inputs is threatening, if our brain feels threatened and our survival is under threat, then we are going to get protective outputs. That's going to be anything from pain, fatigue, anxiety, autoimmunity, all right? Anything that is meant to protect us, dizziness, nausea, all of these things. Slow it down, get out of that situation, do something different. Those are protective outputs. So if we work on giving better inputs or changing the interpretation, we get better outputs. So that's the applied neurology loop. Now, um, I kind of lost my place. What were we talking about before that?
Yeah, so you were really talking about danger and how the body seeks that. Well, I say seeks danger; it kind of does in a protective way. And then you were
True.
talking about outputs and how the body would do things to move away from pain.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, in the context of the low back stuff. Yeah.
yeah,
So yes, you're right. So our survival brain, this back bottom part of the brain, gets first priority for blood flow and activation and resources and fuel. And it's tuned to seek danger. Like you said, it's tuned to find threats because they are more important. We need to know the threats are coming, right? More than I need to know that it's a beautiful sunny day and there's a pretty flower over there, unless that pretty flower is dangerous, right?
mm,
So we are tuned to see more threat in the environment, more negativity as well, because that can
mm,
be threatening.
yeah,
So what happens is if all of these threats start building up, and sometimes we use the analogy of like a threat bucket. Your nervous system is a bucket, and everything from your past experience, like old injuries that maybe weren't fully rehabbed, scars, tattoos, which are technically scars, um, visual issues where your eyes aren't moving perfectly or they don't coordinate and work together well, or you've had you don't see very well. That can be a threat, right? Your inner ear, your vestibular system, your balance is a little bit off. You got hit in the head and it kind of is a little bit dysfunctional or out of balance. Um, you've had illnesses in the past. Maybe you got COVID and your sense of smell didn't come back fully. That could be considered a threat. Maybe you didn't sleep well last night. Maybe your boss yelled at you the other day and you're still ruminating about it. All of these go into the bucket. When the bucket starts to get to a critical point, right, we're going to have a problem. If that bucket totally overflows, we're going to get a full on physiological fight or flight response. That's not ideal. Like adrenaline dump, backed into a corner, right? Like eyes are twitching and you're about to you know, go on a killing spree because you feel threatened for your life in that moment, or you're straight up running away. That's a physiological fight or flight response. That doesn't happen that often for people because what's going to happen before that is we can imagine this bucket has like a faucet or an overflow spout. So when the threats get high enough, we're going to start offloading some of those threats. And those are those protective outputs or threat responses that the brain is going to give us. They're all signals. They're all like action signals to say, change it, do something different, or get out of here. Right? So here's an easy example on the pain side. Runner's knee. You ever hear of this? Runner's knee, jumper's knee, patellofemoral syndrome, IT band syndrome. These fun words that describe knee pain that nobody knows where it comes from. Like, oh, you got a muscle imbalance. Okay. So let's work on fixing the muscle imbalance. It goes away, it comes back. Oh, well, maybe the structure is twisted, which is creating the muscle imbalance. It's like, okay, well, why did the structure get twisted? Well, because the muscles are out of balance. Oh, okay. How'd the muscles get out of balance? Well, because the structure's probably twisted. Oh, fun. Let's just go in circles here forever, right? There's something else going on, right? And when you keep peeling back layers, you always run into the nervous system, right? So in these cases, a lot of times, the threat is not coming from the knee. There's not a problem with the knee specifically, structurally. Yes, there's a muscle imbalance. Yes, it could be out of alignment. But again, doesn't mean that we should be having pain, right? So a lot of times in the neurotraining world, the applied neurology world, we're going to look a little bit deeper. We're going to go look at everything, but start looking above the neck as well. And more often than not, you're going to find some kind of visual or vestibular dysfunction, right? So your visual and vestibular system are always scanning the world and sensing where we are relative to gravity and which way we're going. And it's got to process all that really fast to inform your brain, is this environment safe? So let's say that when you're standing still, you're at gear 0. You're in park. Easy to process. Let's say you start walking. We'll call that gear 1. Okay. At a walking pace, pretty good. I can process this. Not a big deal. Threat level stays fairly low. But as soon as I start to run, now I'm up at gear 3. Now my vestibular system and visual system have to process a lot faster. Okay. And they're gonna fatigue just like any other muscle in your body. They've got muscles work too, and they can fatigue just like anything else. They're sending so many more signals to your brain every moment than the rest of your body. It's like, it's not even close. They are very powerful. So when they get tired, they don't have a way to tell you that they're tired. You don't feel fatigue in your inner ear. Sometimes in your eyes you will, right? Eyes will get tired, they'll get strained, they'll get maybe sensitive to light, you start blinking more. Okay, but most people, what do when that happens? They just ignore it. Drink more caffeine, right? So the inner ear, though, specifically, has no way to tell you that I'm tired or I'm hurting or something wrong. So when that threat level gets high enough, your brain has got to tell you somehow that, hey, if you keep going like this at this pace, we can't process and keep up fast enough. You're going to fall, you're going to hit your head probably, and we're going to die. Right? It's kind of binary. It's pretty black and white when it comes to survival. It's like we fall, we die. So I'm going to protect you in any way I can.
People often ask me what makes my approach different. The truth is, I don't look at pain through a single lens. I look at your movement, nutrition, gut health, stress load, sleep patterns, emotional stress, and nervous system, because pain is rarely caused by just one thing. Once we look at everything together, the path forward becomes clear. If you'd like help understanding your unique pain pattern, book a discovery call at bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. That's bodycheck.co.uk/consultation. Now, back to the show.
So maybe you did have an old knee injury at somewhere along the way. You tweaked it, maybe. Possible, maybe not. But for some reason, your brain might go, okay, how do I get you to slow down? Well, knee pain might be a pretty good idea. As soon as you start feeling pain running on that knee, it's like, I don't like this. I'm going to slow down. Now, sometimes that doesn't work and people keep going. And so then the signal's just going to get louder until you pay attention and do what your brain wants you to do. And so that might turn into back pain or dizziness or nausea, like motion sickness even, right?
Mm,
That you're really gonna get slowed down and stop when that happens, right? That's gonna be much more effective. But there's gonna be, speaking of that overflow spout, there's gonna be smaller signals along the way that are letting you know, "Hey, something is off. It needs to change. Find the threat and remove it." And that's kind of what that's the kind of the principle behind neurotraining is, where's the threat coming from? Can we find the threat that your nervous system is interpreting and change it? Give the brain
mm,
better info.
mm. Yeah, I really like the work by Lorimer Moseley and David Butler.
Mm, yep.
And, they talk about, when you're in pain, is to almost tell that part of your body that it's safe, that
Yeah.
it's okay, there's no threat there. Um, and it's interesting, a couple of weeks ago, I woke up one morning and in my left shoulder, I kind of, first of all, I thought, oh, that feels kind of like a bursitis based on where it was. I thought that's probably a bursitis. And I thought, oh no, my tennis season's coming up in a few weeks. That's the last thing I need. Right? And then the next thing I thought was, but what's it trying to tell me?
Mm,
Right. And I was thinking, okay, well, I've been training really hard in the off season because I take four months off from playing tennis, and I wanted to get really strong and get ready to be able to survive the following 8 months. And I thought, is my body just telling me to slow down a little bit? Am I pushing the limit physically a bit too much? I thought, could it be that? I know some people say that pain in the shoulder can be a sign that you're taking on too much responsibility. And I was
could be.
kind of thinking, uh, I don't feel like I'm taking on too much responsibility. Um, and also, going more esoteric, if you go look at the chakra system, the fifth chakra is about communication. And I guess there's not in my not in my professional world, but in, let's just say, the political world, and that's a whole nother episode we could go down.
Mhm.
There is certain things that I'm being challenged with in terms of communication. That is definitely frustrating me. But I decided that what I would do is I would just tell my shoulder that it's safe, that
Mm.
there's no threat there, it's fine. You know, it's not that my posture's getting worse. If anything, it's improving. Um, so if from a technical point of view, there's less stress going through the shoulder. Um, and within about 5 days, the pain was completely gone.
Nice.
Now, would a bursitis heal within 5 days?
Mm,
Uh, that would be pretty quick, wouldn't it, for a
it would be.
bursitis to heal? So, I just thought that was just an interesting example to throw in there. Um,
It is.
I don't know. I can't, I can't be 100% sure what it was, why it went away. But that was my approach was, one, okay, just calm. I did calm down my training. I just thought, okay, maybe my body just needs a little bit of rest, and from this week I've ramped it back up again, and shoulder's fine.
Nice.
Um, but I thought, yeah, just calm down and just speak to the shoulder and just say, look, you're safe. There's no threat.
Yeah.
You don't need to be sending my brain that signal because it's fine. You know.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example. And the chakra system and the psychosomatic approach and, these are fantastic. They're useful frameworks and lenses with which to work with pain and to, you know, discover what could be causing threat, right?
Mm,
Maybe there is some kind of angst around your communication. My good grief, Lee, I don't know how you can't feel angst in the UK at the moment around
Mhm.
communication. It's pretty
Yeah.
wild times.
Yeah.
I feel it here in the US, and it's nowhere near the level of censorship and crazy wild stuff going on over there. So, I mean, feel your pain there. That could absolutely contribute threat
Mm.
that is showing up in conjunction with heavy training, right? They all go into the bucket
Mm.
is the bigger point,
Yeah.
right? So those are great frameworks that I think everybody should take away from this as useful ways to look at where's threat coming from. You can look at the spiritual side using um, chakra systems, using whatever pick your flavor of how they describe um, the body, and the Eastern philosophies are amazing for that. The Eastern ways of talking about it because they're much more connected mind and body and spirit.
Mm.
But the other ones are great too. Then the mindset, the psychological part of it, also very useful. And John Sarno's work, love, love him. Pain reprocessing therapy. I've had clients that have had great success with these tools. Um, I would still consider both of those top-down approaches. They're cognitive approaches of talking to your brain, right? Talking to your body and helping it feel safe from that top-down approach, and that's great. The bottom-up approach is also very useful, and applied neurology, I would consider more of a bottom-up approach, and they're both powerful and useful and needed. The bottom-up side of things would be like, okay, how is, your vision or your vestibular system contributing to shoulder pain, right? Can you give the shoulder inputs and communication through the body to say that it's safe? One of the tools we often use is called opposing joints, and it works through the biomechanics of the back force transmission system of how you transmit force through the body. Works like a big X. So it was your left shoulder.
Mm.
So then the right hip would be where we'd go, and we do some
Yeah.
proprioceptive joint mapping of the area, and that's going to communicate through force transmission to that shoulder and make it feel more safe and better mapped. Um, Also works through like spinal cord reflexes or central pattern generators, which they call interlimb neural coupling, which is kind of the idea of you don't have to think about walking, right? You just start the movement and then your
Mm.
body takes over. And your body just knows that my right leg moves with my left arm. And so they are connected kind of at the
Mm.
level of the spinal cord. And so they communicate that way too. So that's a really like in the pain world, that's one of my top number one tools that I go to for anybody that's experiencing pain. Let's go to the opposing joint. Let that joint chill for a second and let's work somewhere else and see if we can affect that pain. And it can be really powerful. But bringing it back, Mike, it's all about where can we affect the threat level from the top down approach and the bottom up approach and use all of our frameworks and all of our lenses to see and remove the threats. And these days, the top down approach is needed, maybe more than ever, because we're so stuck in our head. But the one caveat I would say is that the saying we often use in the neuro world is you can't mindset your way out of survival. So if you're stuck in a wound up state of survival, like getting towards that like fight or flight, your mindset tools just don't work. Right? They're just like
Mm.
your amygdala back there, your brainstem, your midbrain, they don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this frontal lobe, this neocortex area that has all this conscious thought, it doesn't process.
Yeah.
That brain doesn't have language, right? It doesn't matter what language you speak in, German, Dutch,
It's reptilian,
English,
right?
it's reptilian, yeah. So the only language it speaks is the language of the body. So, yeah, you got to, and the top terms of the day are like nervous system regulation, right? You got to get regulated before you do the mindset work. And it's true. It is true. We would call that just the bottom up approach, making sure you're fueled, making sure your nervous system's kind of in balance. So you have connection and integration of the whole brain, and you're in a state of like calm, and you can be rational and logical, and not have your emotions just taking over. Right. And I mean, this is, you know, I don't, we don't, I'm not going to get political, but like, this is what you see on social media and out there these days, this like rage baiting, just outrage economy is just hijacking the survival and emotional brain. And when you see stuff like that and it just like gets your emotions up and going, say goodbye to logical reasoning
Yeah.
and rational thought,
Yeah.
right? So you got to go back to working with the nervous system and the body to get you back to level. And then you can actually think about something in a
Yeah.
rational way, right?
Yeah. So when someone's in pain, they come to see you. Is there like a particular process that you take them through?
Yeah,
Or could you briefly explain that?
for sure. Yeah. So, man, there's different types of pain, right? And so the first thing I will have them do is give me some history, give me some background, like what happened, when did it happen, what else is going on in your life, what does it feel like, where is it at, right? And we can narrow down kind of the four big broad categories of pain, whether it's somatic or nociceptive or non-nociceptive, like widespread pain, like a fibro or autoimmune kind of pain, chronic pain syndrome. Um, or is it like somatic, localized, sharp, like it's an injury type thing, or more broad and diffuse and dull, like it might be like a visceral type pain, right? So we want to narrow that down a little bit.
Mm.
And then we start to employ some of the tools from the applied neurology world. And the top tools are going to be something like opposing joints, like I talked about. Something like, so we want to work with pain usually at three different levels. And so I want to look at the peripheral nervous system. And, in the case of something that's neurogenic, like sciatic or um, tingling, burning, electrical, carpal tunnel type things, in the peripheral, then I'm going to go straight to like nerve mechanics. I want the nerves to be moving better,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
we might do some like quote unquote nerve flossing or gliding or something like that to release tension on nerves and get them moving better. And that can be like beautiful pain relief. Even on the other types of pain, it can work well for all of it, right? But the point is, like, I'll go to the peripheral nerve level because the peripheral nerves going into the spinal cord is one of the first places where we can modulate the pain signal. So you can actually turn down pain at the peripheral nerve level. Then we want to look at the spinal cord itself and see if there's any kind of dysfunction going on there. And then we'll go to the brain level, which again, kind of the brain is where the pain lives, right? But we can modulate the signal at those different levels, right? Using different tools. And so that's what I think about. And some of those tools would be opposing joints. So you moving the opposite joint on the opposite side in all these different ways. And then nerve mechanics is another one that I'll often go to with almost everybody. And then those are like quick pain relief tools.
Mm.
And if it's definitely like somatic, nociceptive type pain, I might do something like isometrics. Isometrics are fantastic for pain relief, real quick pain relief. Then I want to get them some relief quick. Then I want to go deeper and I want to assess the different areas of their brain as well as their body, right? We'll do some orthopedic assessments, especially if it's like, I rolled my ankle. Well, I want to see that your ankle is moving
Mm.
properly, right?
Mm.
And look at that. But I also want to go up and look at like, why did your ankle roll in the first place? Do you have poor mapping of the area so your brain just doesn't quite know where your ankle is in space? Is there a cerebellum issue on that side so your movement's not very well coordinated over there and your balance is off? Is there a frontal lobe deficit on the opposite side that's controlling that movement? And these things we can assess very easily with some simple movements and simple drills, as we call them. And when we kind of understand that neural pattern that's going on, it can also give us clues, right? If you have a little bit of a deficiency in activation on one side of the brain, then that's going to affect the movement and the sensory input on the opposite side. So you may experience more pain on that side just because you're not getting good sensory input. And so your brain just wants more information. So it uses pain to be like, hey, I need some movement over here. I need some information. So it's more clues to know where to go next. Like I'm sure you're familiar with phantom limb pain,
Mm,
right? Which is really just a mapping issue. The brain thinks that there should be an arm there,
mm,
but it's not getting any information whatsoever.
yeah.
But the map is still here. So it's like, all right, well, I'm going to give you pain until you give me information. And that pain is excruciating. And it doesn't hurt at the nub. It hurts out here where there used to be a hand, right? Wild. So what we do to help that is you can use something like mirror box therapy, which can be really helpful, or very simple sensory input to that nub so that your brain now knows, okay, here is the border and I need to reorganize this map. So anyway, when we know there's a dysfunction or a deficit in activation somewhere in the brain, we can go right to that area. And if we bring better balance, we really lower threat, right? And that's kind of this first step is how can we lower threat as much as possible? And hopefully that'll just like tell the brain, okay, I don't need pain as the output anymore, right? And then we can work more precisely on different areas of the body with our traditional methods, whether that be physical therapy, corrective exercise, body work, to support the brain retraining, which is, in my opinion, in my experience, the first and top priority.
Mm. So you mentioned there about the phantom pain, and I was imagining someone perhaps amputated from around the elbow level.
Hmm.
If someone was still getting hand pain on that side, how would you reset the brain to know where the border is now? Is it use machinery for that?
Um, no, I mean, I would just do sensory retraining is essentially what we call it, which is every there are multiple different sensory receptors in your skin, in your fascia, in your muscles. And I would use every single one of them to remap the nub, okay, the skin all around it. And the more that you do that, the more the brain's going to reorganize where that border is, and then when it continues to not get information there, those pathways start to atrophy and get reorganized to something else. Right? They don't die. The brain is not going to waste space. It's going to be picked up by something else. So that's essentially the the method you
So
use.
I mean, I was going to say, how do you do that? Do you like literally
Yeah.
palpate the area
Mhm.
and then maybe say something to the brain to say, look,
Yeah.
there is nothing beyond this, or whatever
Yep.
wording you want to use?
Yeah. And that can be very helpful. Um, and I can so first of all, you're going to use all the sensory receptors you can. So you've got light touch that's very light, usually with a cloth or something. You've got crude touch, so like tapping. You've got baroreception, which would be pressure, compression on the area. You've got sharp, so you could poke, 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 or use like a pinwheel on there. Um, you've got warm and cool sensation, so different temperatures. Electric, so like an acupressure pen or TENS unit or something like that for electrical stimulation. You've got chemical, so rubbing some kind of massage oil, CBD oil, essential oil of some kind, and different types. So there are many, many different sensory tools that you can use to give the brain information about this area of the body. So you would be
Awesome.
using all of those often. like
Mm.
5, 10,
Yeah.
20 times a day. You're doing
Yeah.
some kind of sensory work just to remind the brain, hey, this is the border. And then you can also talk to your brain. Absolutely. And some of the ways that I'll do that is I'll, go to um, the good side. And by good, I mean normal sensation. Like pick a spot that has normal sensation. Maybe it's above the area or on the other side, and say, I want um, this. Sorry, start on this side. Say, I want this to feel like this, and you're telling your brain. It's helpful to close your eyes too. I want this to feel like this. You just keep doing that. The other
Mm.
the other tip that I would utilize is painting in the sensation. So on the good side, you're probably not going to have normal sensation on that nub. It's probably going to be numb. It's going to feel weird, right? So there's going to be good normal sensation up here, and you just kind of find the border of where it feels normal and when it changes, and start to just paint that in and try to keep over time. That border will keep moving until it's all normal.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's like, the more repetition you use, it's like you don't go into the gym once, lift some weights, and you've got massive biceps, right? It's
Yeah.
it's a process. You got to do it over and over and over, and then the body's got to adapt to that stimulus. So it's kind of
Yep.
a similar situation.
Yeah. Just takes repetition, frequency of repetition, and the differentiating factor that you can employ sometimes is intensity, which is
Mm.
when you're doing movement training or breath work or visual or vestibular training, you can increase intensity to a certain point, to make that window of neuroplasticity shrink a little bit so it changes faster.
Mm.
Harder to do with sensory input.
Mm.
So it's really about
Yeah.
frequency.
Yeah.
You just got to get a ton of volume, right?
Yeah. So my final main question for you: if there was one thing that you'd like the listener to take away from this conversation, what would that be?
I don't care what type of pain you have, you can get out of it. Full stop. I've seen too many people that have been to everyone and they come to me because someone referred them to me, but they're at the end of their rope and they don't believe that they can get out of pain, or it's become a part of their identity, which is
Mm.
also tricky.
Yeah. Yeah.
My first step with them is I have to get you to believe that you can do this, because otherwise it doesn't matter what I
Mm.
give you. You're going to be stuck in this.
Yeah.
So my mentor, one of my mentors in the neuro world, often says that neuroscience is the science of hope. And I 100% agree with that,
Mm.
because for me, it was true. I thought that I would be in pain forever and I just had to live with it and manage it. It's not true. I just didn't know how the brain works to give us pain and where the threats were coming from. So if there's one thing that people could leave this conversation with, it's that hope that I don't care. Doesn't matter. In my experience, it's proven true. Doesn't matter what
Mm.
type of pain you have, how long you've had it, you don't have to have it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that. And it's interesting, within the check system, there's a number of different models. One being the survival totem pole.
Mm,
What's right at the top? It's the psyche, right? We've got the six foundation factors. What's right at the top? Your thoughts.
mhm,
So it definitely can't be underestimated. And we know about the placebo, we know about the nocebo effects. And, I have talked many, many times about belief on this show because the mind is so powerful. It can override everything that goes on
mhm,
physically in our bodies, you know?
100%. Yeah.
And what's next for you, Brandon?
Training triplets.
Yeah, that's
or training myself to handle the craziness of triplets. Yeah.
yeah.
My I'm a father, new father, so, having 18-month-old triplets right now is quite an adventure.
Mm,
So, um, I think everything happens for a reason and right at the time that it's supposed to. So I
yeah,
think I've been on this journey for a long time, and I'm at a place where I can handle it. It's a challenge, but building a business and, you know, the lifestyle for my family is really my number one focus. But um, yeah, working with people to get them out of pain and building an online business that can support the family and impact more people is really where my head's at, career
yeah,
wise at the moment.
yeah. Awesome. And where can people find you online?
I'm on Instagram at I am Brandon Day, one word. Um, my website is called evolvedathlete.coach. And you can see some of my programs there and read a little bit more about my process. And I also have a pretty fun community on School, SKOOL.com/evolved. There's some free resources for pain relief in there, and some of my group programs and other stuff is there. Those are where I hang out most of the time when I'm not, you know, rolling in the grass with triplets.
Awesome. Brandon, this has been great. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. Um,
Me
I
as
know
well.
sometimes it feels like an echo chamber when I get guests on and they've got a very similar outlook in terms of the work that we do. But yeah, it's been really interesting. And you've certainly quoted a few books that I'm going to go away and have a look at as well.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, this was a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Had a great time.
Yeah, really great. So that's it for this week from Brandon and me. But be sure to tune in same time next week on Beyond the Pain. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Pain. If this episode resonated, please follow the show, leave a review, or share it with someone you know who's been struggling. And remember, pain is not permanent. With the right insight and support, you can turn it into power. Until next time, stay open, stay strong, and keep moving beyond the pain.